Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling. Welcome to another video on the pleasure of painting. This time we are going to be speed painting this Imperial Guard here, as well as showing a mistake that I made and how I corrected it. I don't want all of my videos to just be perfectly rehearsed, no mistakes are made. I want to show you that when you're planning out a color scheme, you can make mistakes, and you often will, and how I think about repairing them. Now the first step is to paint the standard garb of this Imperial Guardsman with Administratum Gray, which is the sort of muted flat tone. These guys with their cloaks and sniper rifles are going to be my Catachan stand-ins, actually. I don't want to use the jungle fighters, but I like their datasheet, and I have one squad to use as scouts. So these guys with their shady cloaks and long-range lasguns make for perfect-looking scouts. These models I got off of Etsy, actually, and I got them for quite a good deal, even though I had some slight issues with shipping. The next step is to paint their cloaks. I'm using Incubi Darkness, which is a very pretty color. I'm not really sure how to describe it. It's a very deep blue with hints of green in it. It's really just an interesting color. I don't think I've really ever seen it. Aside from this one shirt that I own that I bought and then realized was basically the exact same color. But regardless, this paint is one of my favorites, and I painted this all over the cloak and his hood. This paint is quite good, but you still need two coats, of course, of the black. If I was redoing this, I would probably actually use gray primer, but I didn't have any, and I wasn't going to go to Walmart to pick up a can of Rust-Oleum gray. If they even sell flat gray, I might be misremembering that. I wouldn't do it over white, as I think that would make the colors a little too vibrant, and I want these guys to look downtrodden. As they're our scouts, they're not meant to be super flashy. That's about it for the cloak and the main two colors of this model. Next up, we're painting the, I suppose the best way to describe it would be the livery colors. My normal color scheme for these guards is yellow cloth and purple armor. This is just a reference to Wario, who's my favorite video game character. But also, since these guys are scouts, I didn't want to go overboard with it. So they get the gray, but they have a little bit of that purple, not to only help identify them if they're ever in a pinch. Say you have a big fight going on and you see someone, they can just flash a shoulder pad and you'll say, oh, purple is one of our guys. I also decided to paint the gas mask this color, as I figured they'll usually have their hoods pulled quite low over their face, and when they're sitting off in the distance, it won't really be possible to tell against the sort of dour scenery that these guys usually are in. Next up is the leather, the pants, and the boots. I use Rhinox hide for this, which is my favorite brown paint. It applies very well, even in one coat, though of course I still gave it two. And made some slight mistakes on the suspenders. I guess they technically would be. But Administratum Gray actually paints very well over brown. Side note, I painted the wraps around his thighs with Ushabti bone. Steel Legion wrap, sorry. Got that mixed up. Next, I used my metallics to paint the blast gun, as well as his gas mask, pipes, vents, eye lenses, and the thing on his back. I also painted the magazine and the butt pad on his las gun with this, as well as his las pistol. Normally, I would paint, well, not normally, but most people would usually paint these deathcore style las guns with wood furniture, but I'm using black, as I'm not playing deathcore, they just sort of look like deathcore. They are going to just keep their furniture black to represent a slightly more polymer aesthetic. And here's me painting that backpack because I just needed to cut this in because it's something I nearly forgot until I was almost done with the paint job. Here you can see with all of the base coats down, we're onto the shading step, which I'm using Nuln Oil for, which this is the mistake I was talking about. This is old Nuln Oil, and I've been using it for coming on 2 years now, almost 3. It should be 3 at the end of the year. And I hate it. I have sort of forgotten how terrible the old mixture for washes was. I find it's way too streaky, it stains way too much, it's not strong enough in the recesses, and often pools in really strange ways. I don't know if I've been spoiled by the new formula of paints, of washes, which just function infinitely better, but this old Nuln Oil is just not it. And in terms of how I'm going to correct this mistake, is I'm going to use, instead of Nuln Oil for most of it, I'm going to use Gravelord Gray from the Army Painter, their speed paints line. So I'd probably still use new Nuln Oil for his cloak, as I feel that would just complement it better. I will still keep this Nuln Oil, even though I'd say I'm about 60% done with it, but I'd only ever use it to wash things like bases or really greasy mechanical parts, and terrain would be another one if I ever need to make terrain wash. Here you can see me coming back with a clean brush, sort of sopping up the stuff where it's pooling too much. But you really got to be careful about on the cloak. You don't want it to pool at the bottom, it'll dry really weird, and you'll have to go back in and fix it. And here's me applying it to the underside of his long coat, would it be? Or would this be a trench coat? I think this would technically be a trench coat. Regardless, that wraps up the shading stage. And you could leave the model here, which I was tempted to do. However, I did want to bring it up a little bit, as I wasn't totally satisfied with how it was looking. And that leads us into our main next step after we finish applying the wash to the pistol here and any other sections you might have forgotten. In reality, I don't think Nuln Oil is bad, I just have gotten too used to the new formulated shades, which I used on my kill team, which I'm going to use in an upcoming video, to create a very, very tight and pretty color scheme with tremendous ease. The next step is going to be a very simple one. I'm using a flat brush to just dry brush some gray back on, or at least try to. This was just to bring a little bit of color back to it, as I feel, again, the Nuln Oil just pooled in really weird ways. And then I mixed up a slightly warmer color of Incubi Darkness, and I didn't do this dry brush perfectly, but that's just something I slightly messed up. I dry brushed all of the folds and the top of his hood. This is just to, again, add some very easy highlights, and right now it looks terrible, but we're going to implement another skill that I'm practicing on here soon, once I make sure those colors are very solid. Also, remember to always put some sort of highlight on the head. It is the most important part of the model. It will always draw the eye, and adding that highlight makes it pop a lot. And in terms of fixing that slightly dusty, too bright highlight on the cloak, which I will dull down in future paint schemes, I am going to use glazing. Mainly just thinning paint down until it's pretty much translucent and applying it over something. This is mainly used to smooth out highlighting or bring some vibrancy back to a color, which I'm using it to smooth out highlighting. I did 2 glazes, and the highlights ended up looking really good, honestly. Now, that about wraps up this video. This speed paint only took me about 20 minutes of hands-on painting time, which you can kind of tell, but you could easily take it further and refine it a bit more. This effectively was my test model for this army. And I'm going to also do a follow-up video to this where I paint my normal scheme and show you a refined version of this speed paint in terms of final results. Because for the most part, the techniques will be the same, just some of the paints will be slightly different, such as my formulated highlights, as well as the cloak, not the cloak, sorry, his robes. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I'll see you all next time.